Hey, and welcome to Dad's on a Budget Vinyl. My name is Mark. This is my channel. I've wanted to do a channel for quite a while for the vinyl community. Have been working on a couple of videos and don't really have them edited to the point that I want them to be yet. So I saw Mazzy's video the other day on the 10 records that he pulls the most. And I thought, what better way to jump in and dive in and say hey and get my name out there and start making some videos, get off my butt. I saw on Mazzy's video that he had gotten the idea from Chris over at Long Cut, and I thought that was really cool. I've watched quite a few of both of their videos. Um, and the whole idea behind the 10 records that we pull and listen to the most, it's subjective, and I'm sure it's different for everybody. I've watched quite a few of the videos, and they're all over the place. And sometimes people have a precursor or a caveat, and I've got one as well. This is the third collection that I've had. So I had my first collection, from the age I first started buying records at like 10 or 11, till the time that I was about 15. Had probably 175 classic rock records, Steve Miller and Fleetwood Mac, and Rush, and lots of prog rock, Jethro Tull, and Yes, and stuff, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, stuff like that. Ended up having to say goodbye to that collection and didn't start collecting again until I was in my late teens. From my late teens to my late 20s, about a 10-year period. Of course, I was making more money. I was out on my own, bought a lot more records, and I'd say in that period, it's probably somewhere between about 4,000 and 5,000 records, with taste, all over the place, and lost that collection too. So here I am on my third collection, much older. My tastes have changed. I don't know that they've necessarily refined any, but they've definitely changed. So when I go to buy a record these days, I'm not going to be buying something for the third or fourth or fifth time. Okay. I went through that period after I lost that second collection. By then we were all doing CDs for the next 20 years. That's what I did. About 6 years ago, I got back into vinyl, started building, my collection back up. And, there's a lot of, like, for instance, in this collection, I think there's one Led Zeppelin record. I don't have any Doors records. I think I don't have any. I'm not buying that stuff again. The stuff that I tend to buy now tends to be either new stuff that I've been turned on to lately that I never purchased before. Things that I can't live without type records that I will buy umpteenth times as long as I need a copy of it. And then new stuff that I'm interested in. And so with that in mind, if I were to pull the 10 records that I've listened to the most in my lifetime, then they're gonna be records like Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon, and Eagles' Greatest Hits Volume 2, and Boston's debut album and stuff like that, because that's just how it is for a person that's my age, that's been collecting records for that long, okay? So I approach this from the standpoint of what are the records that I go back to over and over and over and over now that mean a lot to me, that I love to listen to, that they always pay off. But also, my wife and I love to have people and friends and family over. We love to entertain. So also, what are those records that I love that I also pull over and over and over when people are coming over, because I know that they have kind of a certain mass appeal, and that people are going to like hearing them. The thing about being a music lover, I love being turned on to new music. And right behind that, I love turning people on to new music that I've just fallen in love with. So if I have a record on, I'm having a get together, we're having some cocktails or some food or whatever the case may be, and one of the people that's there happens to say something like, hey, this is really good. What is this? I love it, right? Because that gives us a chance to share and talk about this music, which is why we love these videos in the first place. And I'll do a much deeper dive into me and to my background and to my taste later on. But music is a very personal, private thing, but it's also meant to share. So my list is going to reflect those records that I love to go back to over and over and over again, but also records that I love to share that maybe not everybody has heard of or is familiar with. And so, with no further ado, let's get started. Mazzy, hats off to you, and Chris, hats off to you for beginning this cool thread about these 10 records that we pull more often than not. Chris, the first video that I saw of yours was like an alt country Americana type video, which I really love because I don't think that we talk about that stuff enough as a vinyl community. We talk about country. We don't really talk about alt country, and if we do talk about alt country, we're talking about Sunvolt or Wilco. And if we're talking about Americana, we're talking about Lucinda Williams or Jason Isbell. And I love all four of those artists. Absolutely love all four of those artists, and I have music by all four of them. But there's a lot of other stuff out there. And Chris, one of the bands that you mentioned was the Jayhawks. In my opinion, the Jayhawks are one of the most criminally underrated bands in North America. They're fantastic. They've been around and making quality music for a long, long time. And while this isn't my favorite Jayhawks record, this is certainly one that I go to over and over and over, and one that certainly has mass appeal. This is Mockingbird Time. This came out in 2011 after Mark Olson, who had left the band, came back. And, you know, hats off Gary Louris, because while he was gone, there were a lot of people that thought the band would fold. Gary carried on in mighty form. But Mark came back, and this is the record that they came out with. The CD has a little video documentary of it about the making of the record that's really, really cool. But I'd like to think that, you know, Gary and Mark both had songs that they had maybe saved, hoping that they would have an opportunity to get back together and make music again. And I'm so glad that they did. From the track one, side one, Needle Drops on Hide Your Colors. And it just takes you on a Jayhawks journey. That's all that is. If you know Jayhawks, you know what I'm talking about. If you don't, you need to find out. Close to Your Side, Tiny Arrows. Side two kicks off with She Walks in So Many Ways. What a great song. Pop sensibilities, perfect harmonies, really good instrumentation, recorded really, really well. Beautiful packaging. And to my knowledge, not a really expensive record. So, I mean, I think you could probably pick this up for $30. So definitely worth your investment, and definitely worth your time. And Chris at Long Cut, shout out to you, bud. Jayhawks, good stuff. Second record is going to be not only one of my favorite records, but a shout out to Mr. Maslov, Norman Maslov, Mazzy. I saw this record first talked about on your channel. This is Kale, Paris 1919. I didn't know anything about this record. I didn't know a whole lot about John Cale. I mean, I knew Velvet Underground. It occurred to me after seeing your video, kind of doing a little bit of thinking, that John Cale's were some of my favorite Velvet Underground songs. So, you know, but I streamed some of this music and fell in love with it. Went on Discogs and saw what original copies were going for. So I put it on my want list, and it stayed on my want list for probably a year and a half. Finally, Four Men with Beards came out with this reissue. I think I picked this up for like $25. I could care less whether it's an original or a reissue, because I'm a music lover first and a collector second. But this album, so if you don't know John Cale, and if you don't know this record, it's a Baroque record with pop sensibilities, or it's a pop record with Baroque sensibilities, but the songwriting is beautiful. It's very English, without being very twee. And it's just a really, really good record, and it delivers from top to bottom. A couple of highlight tracks for me are side one, track one, Child's Christmas in Wales. I love that track. I love the title track. I love Hanky Panky Know How. Antarctica Starts Here. It's just a great record. You'll see this talked about on the vinyl community. There's a reason for it. Now that it's been reissued and it's available and pretty cheap, snag it, pick it up. Good stuff. John Cale, 1919. All right, next up, got to go with some jazz. Um, I'm going to go with a little bit of Art Blakey. You guys know Art Blakey? Oh, wow. How many of the 100 or so records, that he's made could we pull? If you're looking at this record kind of funny, thinking, wait a minute, I know that record, but something looks off, it's because this is a reissue. And of course, it's got the red instead of that kind of a periwinkle blue up here. But this is the Big Beat, Blue Note Records, Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers. This is Not Now Music reprint. And I've seen them get slammed. Man, I'm gonna tell you what, for 20 bucks, it's a great buy for me. Sounds great on my stereo. I'm gonna go ahead and throw this out there right now. I don't mean to step on anybody's toes or whatever, but we spend a lot of time in the vinyl community talking about um, originals and audiophile quality and this, that, and the other thing, which is wonderful, right? And if you have a $2,500 and up system to where you can actually play those records and notice those differences, well, then more power to you, okay? But if you've got a system like, I've got a Marantz receiver and a couple of JBL 60s, a Gemini DJ turntable. I mean, my system, we're talking less than $1,000 for sure, right? So, I mean, this versus that or this or that. I mean, if it sounds good, it sounds good, right? We all hear things differently, but I love the way this sounds. Back to the record, back to the music. I checked this out from the library back when we were still doing that in Irving, Texas. And I put it on. I loved it. What's not to love about Art Blakey? But when it got to that last track on side two, It's Only a Paper Moon, I love that song. I could hear it ad nauseum. Ask my family and many friends of mine. It's a wonderful song, energetic. The soloing is excellent. Lee Morgan's playing on here. If you're a fan of that Miles Davis's kind of buttery smooth muted sound from the mid to late 50s, Lee Morgan almost outdoes him on this record. It's just such a great record, and I love that track. So number 3 for me, Art Blakey, Jazz Messengers, The Big Beat, baby. Blue Note Records. Number 4, can't really talk about jazz without talking about Miles Davis. You see Miles Davis a lot when you're in the vinyl community, and there's a reason for that. I mean, Miles Davis was not only a brilliant musician, I mean, he literally changed the face of jazz music 5 times with, his nonettes, his famous quintets, his modal writings, and then later on when he embraced fusion. And I mean, he's just all over the place, and a musician that's constantly growing and changing and moving. My favorite period, my most fertile period for me would be that mid to late 50s period. I got to be honest with you, Mazzy, you talk about you purchased Bitches Brew, didn't really get it, and I think took it back. You got your money back and then went back a few years later and bought it again when you got it. I still don't get it. And I've heard a lot of people say In a Silent Way is their favorite record, and I don't get it either. I'm not really into that fusion stuff. There is fusion stuff that I like, but those records just don't really do it for me. Love the 80s stuff, love the late 40s stuff, love the 50s and 60s stuff, love the 70s stuff, like On the Corner, that type of thing. But anyway, going down a rabbit trail. Miles put these records out, what was it, 4 of them for Reprise, Working with the Miles Davis Quintet, Relaxing, Smoking, and was it Groovin' or Relaxing? Whatever, I may have just repeated myself. One of you guys will correct me. But all 4 of those records were recorded over about 2 or 3 day recording session and then released individually over time. This is one of my favorites of all of them, and it's a record. It's not my favorite Miles, but it's a record that I go back to over and over and over and over because from track 1 to the last track, every track delivers. It starts off with the gorgeous Rodgers and Hart song, It Never Entered My Mind, and wow. Right? I mean, has he ever played more beautifully? But side 2, in this case, side B, track 2, Ahmad's Blues. That's Miles. That's an Ahmad Jamal song. Miles loved Ahmad Jamal as a piano player, brilliant piano player, beautiful piano player. and he, in honor of him, covered that. But you guys know the rest of this. I mean, this is, Miles's first classic quintet. Miles, Coltrane, Red Garland, Paul Chambers, Philly Joe Jones. In Ahmad's Blues, there's this section where Paul Chambers takes a bass solo and he kills it, slams it, and then bows it. And between the two of them, and then it drops out, and then the band just comes back in, and it's just one of those perfect moments in music. And I could listen to it over and over and over. And back in the day, I would buy a record, and I would make a cassette of it, and then I'd put the record up, and I would just listen to the cassette. I wore that cassette out, but not only that, I've made a lot of mixtapes back in the day, mixed CDs later on. I put that song on just about all of them for a multitude of reasons. And so that record would go back on the player over and over and over again so I could record it again. But anyway, just a wonderful record. We've made breakfast to this. We've cleaned the house to this. We've stayed up late to it. We've gotten up early to it. It's just a wonderful, wonderful record. So that was number 4. Moving on to number 5. Going with a little bit of Beastie Boys, but I'm going to mix it up on you just a little bit. In about 91, me and my friends, every college dormitory in America was jamming Beastie Boys, Check Your Head, or Red Hot Chili Peppers, Blood Sugar, Sex Magic. Love those records. Know them inside and out. Love them like the back of my hand. Big fans of them. I love what the Beasties did with the Dust Brothers for Paul's Boutique. Not a huge fan of the Rick Rubin produced debut. It's a little juvenile, right? But anyway, along the way, the Beasties, I mean, they did start off pretty juvenile. They didn't even know how to play instruments. But along the way, they got better, and they got better quick, and they dove into a lot of different types of music, allowed themselves to be influenced by a lot of different types of artists, got better and better and better on their instruments. And from Paul's Boutique on, every album would have 1 or 2 or 3 instrumentals. And finally, in '96, they were collected and put together on one release called the In Sound from Way Out. It's all instrumental. There's a couple of little spoken word snippets, and there's some priest chanting on Shambhala, but the rest of it's instrumental. Groovy, melodic, cool, hip, just everything that you want out of the Beastie Boys that wouldn't like embarrass you in front of your mom. That's this record, okay? You do the laundry to it, make love to your wife to it, clean the house to it, put it in the car and go for a drive. I'm gonna tell you what, man, it starts off with Ricky's theme, and then you've got Groove Holmes, pow, Son of Neckbone, Bobo in the Corner, N3s. N3s is a percussion track that is just recorded so well and will fill your room with sound, or your car with sound, in such a way that you just want to hear it over and over and over and over. Another song that went on many mixtapes. So Beastie Boys, In Sound from Way Out, snag it. This is a French import. It's on Dynagroove. So the back is, written in French. But it's a beautiful little record. Of course, it's all of these I've got on CD and vinyl, right? Because that's just the way it is. That's what we do, and you know that. But just a wonderful, wonderful listen, start to finish. Let's talk a little bit about Calexico. I see them mentioned. You guys do too. Maybe not near enough. Started out as the rhythm section in Hal Gelb's band Giant Sand. Arizona, pop rock, indie rock, crazy, but really good. I'd say about maybe 1 out of every 12 tracks was brilliant. But these guys were always thoroughly in the pocket, Joey and John, and they broke away from Hal Gelb, formed their own band Calexico, came out with their first album, Spoke, in '97. A very low-key, very lo-fi affair. Very much the sound of a band trying to find themselves. Very sparse. I was telling my wife the other night it was like desert rock, and that it was very noirish and very atmospheric. These guys would go into pawn shops. They would buy things like little toy xylophones and little toy pianos and little toy accordions and old ancient out of tune musicians, musical instruments, and then they go back to the studio and fashion music out of it. And that first record's a little bit hit and miss. I love it, but it's still kind of hit and miss. By the time they came out with this, they had hit their stride. And every record after this, and I think I've got them all, they all sound a little bit different, but they all sound like Calexico. This, in my opinion, is like a desert pop record. Okay, the pop sensibilities are there, while the sparseness and the trains in the background and the different things happening are still there. It's a great record to put on and either listen to intently or put on and just have in the background and kind of, tune in a little bit more every once in a while. But just a fantastic record. If you, most people in the vinyl community know Calexico, but if you don't, this is so worth checking out. Most of their catalog is still available. It's all relatively affordable. And I think maybe for 15 to 20 bucks, you could have this and it could be yours. Look at that. Look at that. Look at that back cover. Okay, because we don't buy records for just the music, right? There's other stuff going on too. All right, so we talked about the Jayhawks. At some point in time, I'm going to do a video about Los Lobos. And between those two bands, I think those are indeed the two most criminally underrated bands in North America. Today I'm going to talk about the Latin Playboys, okay? Most people that know Los Lobos, and again, we'll get into them more later, but most people know Los Lobos feel like they kind of hit their creative peak with Kiko in '92. I happen to agree with that. That album, top to bottom, is just fantastic, and it's kind of a wonder that it's not in this pile. But anyway, after the recording of Kiko was completed, the ideas and the lyrics and the imagery just kept coming. David Hidalgo, I love Los Lobos, but David Hidalgo's the man. Him and Louis Perez, two of the founding members, together with Mitchell Froom and Chad Blake, the producers, got together and formed a signed project called the Latin Playboys. This is Los Lobos, but it's not. I mean, it can't have David Hidalgo in it and Louis Perez in it without reminding you of the Lobos. But it's lo-fi, it's dirty, it's swampy, it's grungy, it's bluesy, and it's got mariachi stuff and it's just all over the place. But it's all really good and really interesting. And I don't know about you guys, but I like things that sound a little different to my ears, that make me perk up and say, wow, what was that? What was that? And after researching this, reading a little bit more about it, I found out that David Hidalgo had a newborn in the house at the time. And he would wake up in the middle of the night with these great ideas, but he wouldn't be able to go into a studio and pound them out. He didn't have a home studio at that time. I mean, Los Lobos they've always been critically acclaimed, but you got to question, the amount of money. I mean, gosh, man, they're 70 and still touring. Anyway, he would go into the kitchen. He'd close the door behind him. He would pound out these little percussive tracks with a knife and a fork on a teacup, and use the ruffling of a paper towel for all these crazy little things. And then Mitchell Froom would come in later and add his funky little organ pieces and the other things that he would do as part of as a production team. They came out with something that's just completely different. It's just completely different, and you owe it to yourself to check it out. Stream it if you don't feel like buying it first. Like a lot of records, this on Slash subsidiary of Warner Brothers. Like a lot of records that came out in this period, didn't come out on vinyl, came out on CD. Their second album, which came out in '93, Dose, great record, still has not ever been released on vinyl. Fortunately for us, this was a record store day release a few years back. I think it was maybe 25 bucks then. It's probably 30, 35 bucks now. If it's 50 bucks, it's worth buying. If your wife will let you get away with it, snag this record, okay? I can't tell you more about the music because I don't really know how to describe it that well. It's just wonderful. It's completely different. Check it out. Next up, I love, and this probably goes back to Paul McCartney, okay, because he was the king of this, but I love either pop music with Baroque sensibilities, and gosh, how many examples of that did we get from Paul and the Beatles, or I love Baroque music with pop sensibilities. Um, this is Goat Rodeo, okay? Um, Chris Thiele, Stuart Duncan, Yo-Yo Ma, Edgar Meyer. So if you guys know music at all, you know that those four guys are masters of their instruments in several different genres. Okay, I'm sitting here looking at the album cover as I'm talking. I just love it. I love it. You know Yo-Yo Ma from the classical stuff. But is there anything that he can't play? You know Edgar Meyer, oh, his bass playing. I mean, it's a gift, right? From straight from heaven. You know Chris Thiele from Nibble Creek and from the Punch Brothers, and if you've kept up with him, there for a minute he was hosting Prairie Home Companion. He's doing a few other things now, and I think, anyway, these guys, between the four of them, have probably played on 800 records, not just collectively or individually, but as you know, soloists on other people's records. They got together, and you know, this record came out in 2011, so about the same time that a couple of the other records I've talked about. So it hadn't been out that long, but I go back to it over and over and over again because it just delivers. This would be more of like, I know I was talking about Baroque with pop and pop with Baroque. A little bit of bluegrass action in here as well because of Edgar and Stuart and Chris, but you know, but always just superb musicianship, wonderfully memorable songs, and this record just got repressed. Came out in 2011. They came out with the repress in 2015 on Sony Music. That's what I've got because it's new, it's still pretty cheap. It's absolutely gorgeous. I mean, look at that. Look at that. Okay. It's absolutely gorgeous. I apologize that I haven't taken more time to show more of these actual records. They're just absolutely beautiful, thick vinyl and beautifully made and all of that. You can get this for probably 25 bucks. Okay, their first one. There for a while, an original 2011 was like 60, 70. Now they got the reprint out, and you know, 2020. Just buy it, okay? It's some of these songs. I mean, they're, you know, some of them in a typical bluegrass form are kind of driving and you know, that type of thing. But like Franz and the Eagle is one of the most beautiful songs, and Franz and the Eagle features Edgar Meyer, one of the best bass players that ever picked up a bass, not playing bass but playing piano. And you'll hear it and it will blow your mind because it is absolutely gorgeous. Just about everybody that's done one of these videos has thrown in a bonus, so I'm going to do the same thing. This is Goat Rodeo's second record, and because this is a little newer, this just came out in 2020, and because the first one maybe didn't sell as well as they'd like for it to, I don't know. But in any case, this record's anywhere from like 13 to 15 bucks, and it's gorgeous. Okay. And it's wonderful. It's just as good, okay, as the first record. That first song on track one or side one, Your Coffee is a Disaster. You just got to hear the track. You got to hear the track. All right, what do we have? 3 records to go. A lot of people have talked about a Bob Dylan record, and I'm gonna eventually have a Bob Dylan showcase. You can see my Bob box back there. I'm a pretty big Bob fan. Now, I haven't always been, and as a matter of fact, I'm not a fan of. I wasn't a fan of Mr. Tambourine Bob. Certainly wasn't a fan of Lay Lady Lay Bob. I was going through a CD warehouse or music warehouse or whatever they were calling them that week, and I came across this. Okay. This is Bob Dylan, Together Through Life. It came with the CD, okay, and then it came with an extra Roy Silver, The Lost Interview, DVD extra. And then it came with this, which is Theme Time Radio Hour, Bob Dylan. This one's about friends and neighbors. It's got everybody on it from Porter Wagner to T-Bone Burnett, Hank Williams or the Rolling Stones. And I think this little package was like $8. So I bought it. I loved the packaging. I love that photo. I love the fonts and the colors and just everything about it. But let's be honest, if it had been $20, I wouldn't have bought it. It was 8, so I did. I got it home and I fell in love with this Bob. This Bob. This croaky, old, creaky, leathery, bourbony, cigarette-y Bob. It's dark and it's beautiful and it's gorgeous and it's recorded so well. The arrangements are wonderful. The musicians are wonderful. Look at them. Look at them. I mean, they just look like music, right? Fell in love with the record. Started reading the credits. There was a beautiful accordion that ran throughout a lot of this music. Realized that it was David Hidalgo playing the accordion. Light bulb moment. And so that's what led me back to Los Lobos, and we'll get into more of that later. But I heard this, I fell in love with it. I was going through a used record store one day and I found a copy of it. It actually, people are always saying, I got this at Goodwill for $4.13. I didn't do that good. But I did pretty dang good. It's a beautiful album. It's well recorded. It came with the bigger version of the poster that I got in this. Of course, I framed it and put it up on the wall. But out of all my Bobs, this is maybe not my favorite, but for a multitude of reasons, it's one of the ones that I pull out most often. Bob Dylan, Together Through Life. Speaking of Bob, I have always been a fan of this funky record, Bob Dylan's Basement Tapes. And you guys know the story. For those few of you that don't, Bob Dylan and the band holed up together at Big Pink, the name of the house that they were sharing in upstate New York, working on songs and hanging out and doing their thing. Bob was married and enjoying domestic bliss and recovering from his car crash and taking it easy. Wasn't wanting to tour, wasn't really wanting the pressure of making a new album, so he's hanging out with the band. And all they're doing is writing songs and banging out songs. And sometimes it's songs that they remember from their grandma, and sometimes it's songs that they just banged out that day or whatever. But these songs were not meant to be released. They were basically Bob and the band, who were both on Columbia Records, writing songs for Albert Grossman, Bob's manager, to farm out to other acts to record. And a lot of them did. Manfred Mann with Quinn the Eskimo. You've got Sonny and Cher, and The Byrds with You Ain't Going Nowhere, and all these different things. But those songs were so popular, and the versions that Bob Dylan and the band had created in Big Pink and at Woodstock began to be bootlegged, and they got tired of it, and I think at some point in time said, hey, let's go ahead and put this out. So even though this stuff was recorded in 67, 68, this didn't come out until 75. I believe that I would like the record better if Bob Dylan had put it together. They left that up to Robbie Robertson, and I love Robbie Robertson's playing and songwriting. I don't know him as a person. I've read good stuff and bad stuff. I love his playing and his songwriting, but because he put this together, a lot of people feel like it's a little band heavy. It wasn't until a few years ago when my wife gave me this for Christmas. I don't know how many of you guys invested in this or not, but this is the complete Bob Dylan Basement Tapes on CD. It's a 6-disc set. It's absolutely amazing and wonderful. They could have probably pulled it down to 4 CDs, but the other 2 are interesting, posterity's sake, right? This record though, okay, let's talk about this for a moment. When you're in the mood for something that's a little bit more back porch, something that's a little bit less polished, but certainly heartfelt, something that's guaranteed to put a smile on your face, something to sip along to, just whatever the case may be. What a great record. For those of you that don't know it, Odds and Ends, Lo and Behold, Bessie Smith, Tears of Rage, This Wheel's on Fire, Nothing Was Delivered, You Ain't Going Nowhere, Too Much of Nothing, Yay Heavy, and a Bottle of Bread, Yay Heavy, and a Bottle of Bread, Ain't No More Cane in the Brazos. Right? Levon, Richard Manuel, Robbie Robertson, Garth Hudson, Bob Dylan. Man, it just, right? Just such a wonderful, wonderful record. In typical Sgt. Pepper form, I could stare at that record cover for hours. I'm sure I have. I'm sure those of you that own this have too. If you don't own it, you can buy one and then you can stare at your own for hours. Okay, last but not least, the record that we've actually been listening to. This is Yola Tango. When I first got into collecting records again that third time around, I wanted stuff that I hadn't already bought before. And I had a few Yola Tango CDs. I didn't have any of their vinyl. And one day I saw this, and I hadn't heard it yet. This came out in 2003. I think I bought it in like 2004. Wasn't that familiar with them yet. Like I said, I had a couple of CDs, but I love the cover, okay? And there's just something about it. I thought, let me snag that, take it home, throw it on the player, and listen to it. It's become one of my favorite records of all time. Listen. It's melancholy, but joyful. It's lo-fi, but recorded really, really well. You can hear Ira's fingers as they're going up the frets. Anyway, back to the record. You know, it starts out with the beautiful Beach Party Tonight, Little Eyes, Nothing But You and Me. I love Today Is the Day, Tiny Birds, How to Make a Baby Elephant Float, right? Let's Be Still, the 10-minute track on side 4. Put it on, lose yourself in it, or go do something else and have it on in the background, or whatever the case may be. It's just simply a wonderful, wonderful record. I'm not sure about availability anymore. Gosh, man, most records that were cheap in 2003 probably really certainly are not now. You know that, right? But anyway, you know, I knew that I would talk longer than this record runs. So what we're actually listening to is the CD version of it, because the record's 4 sides, and I knew I'd be talking, you know, anyway, so I'll put on that instead of this. But this is a wonderful record. Put it on, do your thing, listen to music, share some music, have some fun. So, no further ado, thanks so much for coming and hanging out. I love talking about music. I love listening to you guys talk about music. Love sharing my collection. I'd love to hear your feedback. I would ask you for the thumbs up and the notification dingy and all that other kind of stuff, but I guess I just kind of did in a roundabout way, right? Come back again, hopefully to have more material up. We can talk about records, comment in the section, let me know what you like, what you didn't like, let me know what you'd love a little bit more of. I've got a video coming up, a Jayhawk showcase. I'm going to do a Los Lobos showcase. I want to do a soundtrack showcase and a couple of others. So I hope you've enjoyed this one. Y'all take it easy. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.